We should never work on the basis of ultimatums and deadlines. We need to give matters serious consideration. Everybody should be satisfied with the fact that this matter has been tabled on my desk by the minister. It is being addressed, and it will be addressed properly, because we are not a reckless government. We are not a government that does things outside the parameters of the law.
So what exactly does that mean for King Wile Kaya Dalindlebo? 3 kings have issued an ultimatum to Cyril Ramaphosa: release the AbaThemubu king or kiss their subjects' votes goodbye. The deadline given was today, and the president has said nothing about pardoning the king. Now, while Ramaphosa has everyone guessing, the AbaThemubu king's son, who met with the president on Sunday, is confident of his father's release.
The processes are being dealt with thoroughly. We have to respect the constitution as much as possible. The only thing that I would say now to the Thembu nation is patience. We should be patient. The king will make his way home.
The AbaThemubu king was sentenced to 12 years in prison for assault, arson, kidnapping and defeating the ends of justice. It's reported that he disciplined a group of people by torching their homes, administering corporal punishment and kidnapping the family of a man who failed to present himself before his court. So why should he be released? We're joined by Kathleen Powell, Associate Professor in Public Law at the University of Cape Town, from our Cape Town studios. It's very good to have you with us. What way should this go?
Thank you. The power to issue a pardon is one of the most opaque and unreviewable powers that the President of South Africa has. It's a remnant of the royal prerogative to pardon. So we don't know what criteria the President will use to make his decision, and he doesn't actually have to tell us. It can be just mercy. So this is obviously a process. There's reference to it. The Minister of Justice and Constitutional Development makes a recommendation. But quite what the criteria are for that recommendation have not been shared. All we've been told is that the victims have been consulted. We don't know whether he's going to get a pardon. And I can name issues, set out issues that militate against it, but I don't know what President Ramaphosa is going to decide.
Okay, tell us about those issues.
I am concerned about the rule of law, which is that everybody should be subject to the same law, so that people who commit serious crimes like that should actually bear the consequences of them. I'm also very concerned that this issue is being presented as Western law triumphing over customary law, whereas the particular acts of violence that the king carried out were not carried out in consequence of a customary law court procedure either. There was no hearing of the people who were then had their houses torched or were beaten or suffered other deprivations. So what I'm seeing here is the misuse of power by an autocratic ruler being treated as though it's normal and somehow okay. I think it would be bad for all law, but also for customary law, if this were normalized.
And do you think customary law should be looked at in this incident? I mean, is this something that just highlights possibly the need for change there?
Well, customary law is meant to be a living law, and it's meant to be affected by the people that it governs. Now, the process of criminal trial hearings in customary courts, they involve everybody in the community, and it's generally the councillors who make the call as to what should happen in a case. That recommendation then can go to the chief, who can support it, but there's first a quite an involved process of engagement by everybody who's affected by it. You don't simply have somebody stepping in from the outside and making a decision without anybody getting a hearing and anybody whose interests are affected being able to explain. If that were to happen, customary law would develop by itself. I don't think any development is necessary here. The existing custom, which is that there is a community process whereby a trial is held, should simply be respected.
So rule of law should step in your opinion, when you feel that customary law is being abused and there's nobody to hold the abuser to account.
I think indeed, I think it's being violated. I think that this is a terrible cost of that is being borne by the most vulnerable people in our society, who are the rural poor, who don't have access to other courts. And in fact, the recent legislative changes made would cut them off even further from the help of other courts. But it's almost academic, because they can't get to other places of help, and they are being left more and more at the mercy of autocratic leaders who seem to think they can do whatever they like and get a pardon for it.
Okay, let's bring in Zolani Mkiva, Secretary General of the Congress of Traditional Leaders of South Africa. Good to have you with us. So why are you calling for the king to be pardoned? What is it that you know that we don't?
Well, what informs our call for his pardon is the reason that when he presided over that case, he was doing so as part and parcel of his responsibility. You know that a king, he's a judicial officer, so he was basically chairing and presiding over a case. So the problem then is that because there are no proper instruments and codes, as well as a handbook that are supporting the traditional courts in the country. So when his decision was ordered, the people who carried out that decision did not act within the framework, because the framework is not written, and therefore they went beyond what they were told to do.
Okay, hold on a sec, but he's in jail for kidnapping, assault, arson, and defeating the ends of justice.
Come again?
He's in jail for kidnapping, assault, arson, and defeating the ends of justice.
No. Remember that we have got two justice systems in this country. There is this one which is dispensed.
Yeah, but surely that's not acceptable in any justice system.
Dispensed by the Roman Dutch law court. So what happened here is that a case that took place under the stewardship of a traditional court came out in that particular fashion. And then the other side of the justice system then it presents itself as the superior form of justice.
I know, but I'm asking, I mean, these are the allegations: kidnapping, assault, arson, and defeating the ends of justice. I mean, in whatever system you're talking about, when is it ever acceptable?
No. It is not. It is not an allegation. It is a fact. And until we deal with those facts, this thing will recur. We need to get into the bottom of this. So we are saying that the king was caught up in a situation where we have two systems in the country. The other system is so-called civil, which presupposes that the other one is uncivil. Those are the things that we need to deal with. So we are saying that we're making this call so that he be released, because the context in which he was tried is really unfair. However, we do take stock of the fact that in the process, some people were injured and some people's rights were also violated. And
okay, so who is going to hold him responsible for whatever it is that you admit that he's done? I mean, are there traditional leaders who can do this?
Come again?
Who will hold him responsible for the acts that you admit that he has done? Is it the traditional leader? Whose responsibility is it?
Look, Jane, you are asking a question which is really unfair at this point. Remember, the king has been in jail for 4 years already.
Okay, I'm asking if somebody does something that is not seen as acceptable in the community, in your community, whose responsibility should it be?
No. We are not saying people must do things that are unacceptable in the community.
I'm not saying that. I'm saying who is responsible for dealing with people who do things that are unacceptable?
It's the people themselves. Remember, the sovereignty of the people is above even the constitution. So I'm saying, therefore, the king is accountable to the people. He's accountable to his own people. He is not a law unto himself. He is part and parcel of the institution of traditional leadership, which in itself is an organ of people's power.
Okay.
And therefore, he is placed at that level as a leader and a custodian of his own people. But without the people, he is not the king. He's a king because he has a people, and therefore...
Yes, and many of those families supported his conviction. Let's just bring in Kathleen Powell now. I mean, when you hear that, how is this going to play out? How should it be resolved now?
Well, I have to take issue with a number of things that Mr. Mkiva said. Let's take a step back. The way I think it should be resolved is that he should not get a pardon, but I don't think that should happen without an explanation to answer some of the points that Mr. Mkiva has made, because he's setting up this event as though it's Western Roman Dutch law somehow torturing customary law and the AbaThemubu people. I think it is the rule of law, both customary and Western law, upholding the rights of individuals not to be tyrannized. That's something completely different. Just a couple of points. The claim that he was acting as a judicial officer, that is incorrect in two ways. One is you're suggesting that he shouldn't be held guilty for the burning and torturing of people because he did that as a judge. Now, he didn't do that as a judge, firstly because there was no proper process under customary law. So it is on the facts that proper hearings were not held. The usual customary law process was not followed. So you can't claim he was acting as a judge. In fact, if you want to use the Western analogy, it's like a judge on a Saturday afternoon walking up to somebody in the street and shooting that person. That judge doesn't get immunity because the judge is not acting as a judge. The judge is acting as a private individual. Secondly, the sovereignty of the people is indeed protected by the Constitution, subject to the Constitution which protects the sovereignty of South Africa, all South Africans as a people. And one of the problems with this case is that King Dalindyebo was acting as a law unto himself. You can't claim, no, this is protecting him, is protecting the AbaThemubu, when what he was being sentenced for was abusing the AbaThemubu.
Okay.
You know,
okay, let's leave it there, Kathleen Powell and Zolani Mkiva. Excuse me interrupting you there. So obviously a tough decision ahead for Cyril Ramaphosa. Still ahead, Christianophobia, horrific attacks on churches around the world have sparked fear that the persecution of Christians is on the rise. We find out if this is true. But first, let's take a look at your international weather.